Hi everyone, it's me, Tim, and today I want to talk about my top 5 modern RPG Masterclass. Before I start, new camera setup. It's mounted, it's a little higher, it's a little farther back. Let's see how this goes. I'm playing around with things. So, what do I mean by the top 5 modern RPG Masterclass? Well, I did a video about a month ago of my top 5 video games. And these are the games that I grew up with and the ones that I thought were the most influential in how I made games in my career. That's not what these 5 RPGs are. These are going to be 5 role playing games that I think are the best to learn from certain aspects of them for game development and specifically for RPG development. Do I think these are the best games ever? Maybe not. Maybe I do. That's not the point of this list. This list is, you want to learn how to make RPGs? There are 5 games on this list that you should pay attention to, whether you even like them or not. They do what they do better than anyone else. I also want to mention that if I mention a game, but I don't mention its a prequel of it or a forerunner or something, it's because I think the one I'm talking about is better to learn the thing I think it teaches. Also, I'm gonna after I do the 5, I'm gonna talk about 3 runners up, and I'll tell you why they didn't make it into the top 5. So let's start. And this is probably gonna surprise you. I'm gonna start with World of Warcraft, an MMORPG. World of Warcraft was amazing because, in my opinion, even though it wasn't the first MMO, and maybe not even the best MMO, it did prove that if you make the games easier, there'll be more fun. I played EverQuest before any other MMORPG, and I love EverQuest, but EverQuest was hard. Compared to EverQuest, I still remember somebody who worked on it said, yeah, in the whole carrot stick model, we decided less stick and more carrot. To be honest, WoW is pretty much all carrot. It is an easy game. It is an easy game. I said that once to a coworker who was a huge WoW player, and he was offended a bit. He said, I play in raids and blah, blah. And I'm like, it's all, timing and motion. You might as well be playing Dance Dance Revolution. But it's fun. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm belittling WoW because it is a fun forward game. And if you remember my design pillars, one of them was fun trumps realism. In fact, I think fun trumps just about everything. And you can tell when they made World of Warcraft, they were like, this is fun forward. It is the most important thing about WoW is that it's fun. Which is why when I tell you what my number 2 RPG for you to learn from is, it's going to be a bit of a surprise because it's Elden Ring. Elden Ring is hard. It proves the adage that harder is more fun, which is the exact opposite of what I just said about World of Warcraft. And that's because games can have a design pillar, and if they execute well on that pillar, they're a perfect example of that pillar in action. Elden Ring is a perfect example of an RPG where harder makes it more fun. Now, I know a lot of people go, oh, well, why don't you talk about Dark Souls, Demon Souls? And it's because for me, getting into the open world of Elden Ring where I could come back and do a boss later, there was a lot of non-bosses. It was a beautiful open world. The story and lore was there for you as much as you wanted. You kind of needed to dig for it sometimes. It wasn't always just presented to you front and center. I loved that. Some other things that when I played it made me go, ooh, I do like how this works, is their use of status gauges. And by that I mean, in a lot of my RPGs, you would gain poison, you would gain radiation, and it would just start affecting you immediately. I like how Elden Ring, when you were attacking something that caused poison, it would add up in its own poison gauge. And if that gauge filled up, then bam, you got a status effect and you're poisoned. So you could see that status effect, you could see that gauge filling, and there were things you could do to stop it before you actually got poisoned. I like that because there's a lot of things you can do with that in terms of a role-playing game mechanic. You can make the gauge fill less quickly. You can make the gauge bigger. You can have things that drain stuff out of the gauge. I like that. And this is all before you even get the status effect that gauge is controlling. So Elden Ring showed me a lot of things that I didn't used to do, or I didn't do in my games, but I thought were a really, really good lesson in how to make a beautiful open world, lore filled game with cool mechanics. My third RPG, Skyrim. Skyrim is an absolute masterclass in exploration. There's a reason people are still playing this game, 12 years later, almost 13 now. There's a reason it's been ported to everything under the planet. It's a wonderful game, and I particularly am calling out the art, especially the variety in art, and the level design. There are lots of places that you can go explore in Skyrim that are gorgeous unto themselves. Like, here's a cave. Here's an icy cave. Here's a cave with a lot of water in it. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Here's an underground city. Here's an above ground city. Here's a village. Here's a village in a forest. Here's a village perched on the side of a mountain crag. Wonderful. I loved Skyrim. I loved exploring Skyrim. I loved the feel it had. I've told many people that Skyrim is the closest that I've ever come to playing D&D on a computer the way it seems like it in my head when I'm playing the tabletop version. So Skyrim definitely is up there in my top 5. My fourth one, Fallout New Vegas. Fallout New Vegas, I think, is the masterclass in taking an older game and bringing it into a new era. The 3 things that I think Fallout New Vegas did exceptionally well: it extended the storylines, and with those, the characters and factions of the first 2 games into a modern 3D era in its own location. So we got to see the NCR, and we got to see the Brotherhood of Steel, all brought up to date and moved into a nearby adjoining area from California into Nevada, and seeing how they would interact. I thought Fallout New Vegas got the humor really well. There were parts of that game that were hilarious, both in dialogues and environmental storytelling, and just some of the situations you find yourself in. And that's hard to do. It's really hard to do. So props to them. And then finally, I love the reactivity in Fallout New Vegas. You had to make choices in Fallout New Vegas, and they weren't presented to you in black and white. And those choices had significant consequences. So they weren't fake choices. It wasn't like, do you want to do A or B? And then A or B turned out to be kind of the same thing. They are fundamentally different. If you join House versus Kaisar's Legion versus Yes Man, those are all wildly different things that happen. I think one of the things that I really loved when I played Fallout New Vegas is when I finished it, I immediately wanted to play it again, which is a sign of a really good game. Now, props to Fallout 3 for bringing Fallout from 2D into 3D. I could call out a lot of things, but especially like turning the called shot mechanics into VATs. Wonderful. But I think Fallout New Vegas went the next step with a lot of those things, and I think the tone is perfect. So Fallout New Vegas is what I point to when people are like, hey, how would you take a game from the 80s or 90s and turn it into a modern game? Fallout New Vegas. And then finally, the Masterclass number 5 of my top 5, Baldur's Gate 3. Finally got to play it. Let me just say that I'm super happy that turn-based is back and in vogue. I never went out of style with me. Also, pure D&D is now considered fun again. It's not too hard. It's not niche. I love that. I particularly love character customization in Baldur's Gate. You can make wildly different characters that behave wildly different in the game. And again, there's a lot of choices, player choices, and a lot of reactivity to those choices. The thing that got me with Baldur's Gate 3 the most, though, is I love it when industry know it alls, and I'm talking developers, critics, fans, get proved wrong when they say things like RPGs are dead or turn-based is boring or D&D is dead or it's niche or whatever. And then I love Baldur's Gate 3 comes along and just goes, nope, you're wrong. You are wrong. And I can already hear the cue them up the exception of to that saying, no, Baldur's Gate 3 is the exception that proves the rule. No, it's the rule. The problem is nothing is really gone. Adventure games aren't gone. PC gaming isn't dead. These things are as good as what the games are that are made for them. And Baldur's Gate 3 proves that turn-based D&D computer games can be great. Now, I mentioned I had 3 runners-up. Ooh, I'm talking a long time. I had 3 runners-up. I will tell you quickly what they are, what they teach well, and why I didn't include them. One is Vampire Bloodlines. Didn't include it because I worked on it, so I thought that was unfair. But I think it has got great atmospheric storytelling and characters and dialogue, and I had nothing to do with any of that. And it is fan-freaking-tastic. And it's an RPG. So there's a lot to learn from Vampire Bloodlines. The second runner-up was Half-Life 2. It's not an RPG. It's a shooter, but wow, it's a shooter with everything else. It's got story. It's got characters. It's got puzzles. It had vehicles you can actually drive around and gameplay based on physics. And it is a super, super fun game. And sometimes I look back at it and go, did that really come out like 20 years ago? It did. But still, all these games are 21st century. So, and then the last one, before Half-Life 2, Half-Life Alyx, played it in VR, great. So proves that whatever they're doing in Half-Life 1 and 2 moves forward into modern VR gaming. And then the last one I just wanted to mention was Vampire Survivors. Wow, there's 2 vampires in my runners-up. Again, it's not an RPG, and also it's indie, which isn't my area of expertise. I just wanted to give it as an example when people go, oh, I can't possibly make games this big and this involved and all that, is Vampire Survivors was made by a very small group that were indie and not hugely funded. It does so much with so little. I was like addicted to this game for probably like about a month during the holiday season of 2022. I just played this game all the time. It was super fun. I loved it. It is basically teaches you, hey, you know Unity? You can get some simple pixel art put together. You can make a great game. No excuse. Vampire Survivors shows how to do it. But it's not an RPG, so it didn't make it in my top 5 RPG masterclass. But it should be in some masterclass for someone that teach you how to just make a good game in Unity without a lot of budget. Anyway, that's my top 5 RPGs that you could learn a lot from. I recommend you study them. If you haven't played them, play them. Even if you don't like them, there's a lot to learn from these games. They're great.